Jake Carter pushed open the heavy, scuffed door of the Rusty Anchor, a place he'd heard about through local whispers. An old bar with dim lighting, walls plastered with faded beer ads, and a clientele as rough as the weather-beaten docks. Just outside, a place that seemed to pulse with a mix of stubborn pride and hard-lived stories. After a brutal day filled with endless interviews that had left him drained and uncertain about the next chapter of his life, Jake craved a moment's peace, a quiet spot to drink something cold, and maybe, if luck allowed, catch some silence between the blaring jukebox and the raucous laughter, a brief escape from the chaos of civilian life that often felt alien after years in uniform. But as soon as he stepped inside, he felt the weight of eyes scanning him. Tall man with close-cropped hair, his arms marked with the intricate black ink of military tattoos that told stories of battles fought and survived, his posture still holding the disciplined edge of a soldier even now out of uniform. The bar was packed, but not overwhelmingly so, just enough to make his presence noticeable, and the scent of spilled beer mixed with stale smoke and fried food wrapped around the room like a cloak. But it was the sharp, narrow gaze of the man behind the counter, Mark, the bar owner, that made Jake pause for a heartbeat, sensing immediately that this was no friendly welcome. Mark was a stocky man with a face hardened by years of tough decisions, his jaw set tight, eyes dark with suspicion, and a flash of hostility that only hardened further as Jake approached the bar, politely nodding and asking for a seat, hoping to avoid trouble and simply enjoy the momentary reprieve from his worries. But Mark's lips curled into a thin line, and with a voice low and rough, he replied, "This isn't a place for guys like you." A phrase heavy with unspoken judgment, a dismissal that stung far deeper than Jake expected, not just because of the words, but the coldness behind them, the invisible wall erected instantly between the veteran and the bar's supposed refuge. Jake's heart tightened with a mix of frustration and disbelief, his mind flickering back to countless times in uniform when respect had been earned the hard way, but now, here in civilian life, the scars and service seemed to bring suspicion instead of honor, and with calm that belied the fire smoldering beneath, he tried to reason, explaining quietly that he just wanted a seat. A drink, nothing more, but Mark shook his head, crossing his arms like a fortress determined to keep Jake out, repeating that this place wasn't for him, that he should leave. The tension began to rise as a few patrons nearby noticed the exchange, their murmurs rising with curiosity and the subtle unease that always follows confrontation. Jake's jaw clenched, his fingers tightening around the strap of his worn leather bag, the memory of countless missions, teamwork, and sacrifice echoing painfully against this petty act of rejection, and yet he refused to escalate, hoping that reason might prevail. But Mark's stubbornness was a wall as solid as the concrete foundation beneath the bar's floor. The crowd's whispers grew louder, some taking sides silently, others merely watching the unfolding drama with the detached interest of those who had seen too many fights start over less. Suddenly, without warning, Mark's hand shot out, grabbing Jake's arm with a grip that was rough and possessive, yanking him toward the door as he barked an order to leave. The force was enough to jar Jake, shock momentarily numbing the quiet rage bubbling inside, and as he was pushed out into the chilly evening air, the door slammed shut behind him, muffling the confused gasps and angry murmurs of the small audience inside. Standing alone on the cracked pavement, the sharp night air cutting through his jacket, Jake's chest heaved, not from physical exertion, but the sting of humiliation, the bitter taste of rejection that clung like smoke in his lungs. And as he stared at the glowing neon sign flickering erratically above the bar's entrance, he vowed silently to himself that this was not the end of the story, that tomorrow would bring a reckoning, and he would return, but not just as one man seeking a quiet drink, instead backed by the unbreakable bond of brothers who would remind everyone that respect is not optional, and those who serve deserve more than scorn. With steady hands, Jake pulled his phone from his pocket, fingers hovering over names of teammates who had stood by him in firefights and darkest nights, knowing that the next chapter was about to begin. One where courage and loyalty would reclaim, honor in a place where it had been denied, and where the echo of a single man's dignity would call forth a force too strong to ignore. Jake sat alone in his small apartment late into the night, the weight of what had happened at the Rusty Anchor pressing heavily on his mind, replaying the moment when Mark, the bar owner, had coldly turned him away despite his years of sacrifice, can service, and feeling a fierce determination rising inside him that this injustice could not stand unchallenged. He reached for his phone and began to call and message the brothers who had stood beside him through fire and hardship. His old Navy SEAL team, men who had shared the darkest missions, countless sacrifices, and unbreakable bonds forged in the crucible of combat, knowing that they would understand the sting of disrespect more than anyone else. That honor was not just a word to them, but a code they lived by. As his messages and calls went out into the quiet night, responses came quickly. Voices and texts filled with concern, solidarity, and the unmistakable steel of loyalty. As one by one, his teammates expressed their readiness to stand with Jake, not out of anger or desire for revenge, but from a deep respect for their brother, and the principle that a man who served his country deserved dignity and not discrimination. Throughout the hours, they shared stories of past battles and lessons learned about courage, resilience, and the importance of standing up not just for themselves, but for those who could not, weaving a tapestry of brotherhood that transcended distance and time. And by the early morning, plans were being drawn, a return to the Rusty Anchor not as an act of violence, but as a united front to demand respect, to remind everyone what true honor looks like, and to rewrite the narrative that had attempted to diminish Jake's worth. As dawn broke, Jake and his team prepared. The quiet before the storm charged with a sense of purpose and unshakable resolve, knowing that when they walked back into that bar, they would not only be reclaiming respect for one man, but sending a message to a community that valor and dignity could not be ignored or disrespected without consequence. In the stillness of the morning, amidst the hum of preparation and quiet conversation, the bond of brotherhood shone brighter than ever, a powerful reminder that sometimes the strongest battles are fought not on distant fields, but in every day. Places where courage means standing tall and demanding the respect that every veteran and every human being deserves. Jake and his 6 fellow Navy SEALs approached the Rusty Anchor that evening with a quiet but unyielding confidence, born of years spent operating in the world's most dangerous places. A brotherhood forged in combat and cemented by shared sacrifice, that none in the bar could mistake as they pushed through the worn door and into the crowded room where the familiar haze of cigarette smoke, spilled beer, and raucous laughter filled the air as usual. The moment their boots touched the wooden floor, the bar's noise dimmed to a murmur, eyes flickering toward the group as the unmistakable aura of disciplined warriors in civilian clothes drew attention and respect without a word spoken, their presence alone commanding a reverence that shifted the room's energy instantly from casual revelry to tense anticipation. And Mark, the bar owner, felt a chill crawl down his spine as he recognized the veterans whose tattoos and bearing told stories of service, courage, and an unbreakable code of honor that dwarfed his earlier display of arrogance and prejudice. Jake moved steadily to the bar, every step deliberate, exuding a calm strength that silenced the whispers and halted the stares, his voice measured but firm as he ordered a round of drinks for his team, signaling that they were there not for confrontation, but to claim the respect that had been so callously denied the day before, the men standing behind him like shadows of unwavering loyalty, eyes sharp and unyielding as if daring anyone to challenge their presence. The crowd, now fully attentive, watched as Mark attempted to regain control of the situation, brushing off the moment with a forced smile and hesitant apology, but the weight of the SEAL's silent dignity made it clear that this was not a place for hostility or disrespect. The atmosphere was thick with unspoken understanding that these men represented more than themselves. They embodied sacrifice, honor, and a brotherhood that refused to be ignored or belittled. Slowly Mark swallowed his pride, the stubborn wall of his previous judgment crumbling as he met Jake's steady gaze and recognized the mistake he had made in turning away a true hero. And as he finally offered a grudging apology, the room shifted. Again, this time toward reconciliation and newfound respect. Patrons who had previously jeered now nodded in acknowledgement. Conversations softened, and the tension that had clouded the bar lifted like a fog, replaced by an atmosphere charged with respect and quiet admiration. Jake and his team settled into the bar, sharing quiet laughter and stories that resonated beyond the surface. transforming the Rusty Anchor from a place of judgment into a community forged by honor and understanding. Their presence a powerful reminder that true strength lies not in aggression but in dignity, loyalty, and the courage to stand up for what is right, forever altering the bar's dynamic and leaving an indelible mark that would ripple through its walls for years to come. Jake and his SEAL team lingered long after the initial tension dissolved, their presence transforming the Rusty Anchor from a place marked by suspicion and prejudice into a sanctuary of newfound respect and camaraderie. As they exchanged stories, laughter, and quiet moments with patrons who had once eyed them warily, the atmosphere shifted palpably, Mark the bar owner watching from behind the counter with a humbled gaze that betrayed a dawning realization of the true meaning of honor and brotherhood, recognizing how these veterans carried themselves not with arrogance, but with a grace and strength forged in the harshest crucibles of combat and life, their demeanor inspiring a quiet reverence that gradually permeated the crowd and the very walls of the establishment, turning whispers of judgment into conversations about courage, dignity, and the power of standing up for what is right. News of the encounter spread swiftly through the town, reshaping the bar's reputation from a rough hangout to a place where respect was earned and upheld, where Jake and his team were no longer strangers, but pillars of the community who embodied the values that many aspired to but few truly lived. And over time, the Rusty Anchor became more than a bar. It became a symbol, a testament to the idea that true honor transcends uniforms and appearances, that it is built on the foundation of courage, integrity, and the willingness to defend not just oneself, but those who cannot defend themselves. And through their steadfast example, Jake and his brothers reminded everyone who walked through those doors that respect, once won, changes everything, creating bonds that last far beyond a single night, and lighting a path toward a future where dignity and justice are never just words, but lived truths embraced by a community forever changed.